Welcome to The Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by aliens who look a lot like humans. Because why would another planet produce anything different? Now, let's dim the lights and start the show.
Welcome everybody to The Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by The Aquarium by Daniel Wolf. You won't be able to take your eyes off this incredible story. Pick up Daniel Wolf's The Aquarium. Welcome everyone to The Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And we're filmmakers. We do a lot of things in front of, behind the camera, and we like to use that kind of information as a way of discussing and analyzing films. For me, it's about getting better at this process. Like I enjoy like hanging out and talking, and I really love having to formalize my thoughts to some degree or another. Like to watch a movie and talk about it after the movie is really fun. And that's, you know, half the jazz that we get. Like most of our conversations aren't too different from when you and I actually walk out of a movie together. We're like, bro, what did you think about? What did you think about? What about that moment? Like all that stuff is really fun and entertaining. And then for me, like to feel like I need to have more than that to come on the show, right? And so we have to really double down on our thoughts. Like, okay, I think this, but why do I think this? Where is that coming from? And retrenching, like, what is it really at play and at stake? And having to sit and think and formalize those things really helps me as a writer and as a director as I go into my own projects. And one of the things that, you know, I get inspiration from, not just watching these things, but then last week, you know, for us, this is only a week and a half ago, or one week ago, the Oscars took place, and it was so cool to watch Anora and The Brutalist, you know, just sweep up, you know, and there's been a lot of talk about Anora spending $18 million on its budget for the Oscars, like not marketing overall, from what I understand, but from what I've heard is they spent $18 million lobbying and trying to get Anora to win at the Oscars. What? Yeah. And so just the marketing.
I thought it only cost $6 million to make the movie.
It only cost, so they tripled the budget once they, you know, saw that they had a shot at winning some statues, and said, okay, so we'll triple the budget just for marketing, towards the Oscars. And so all that goes into, who knows, like billboards and, you know, making DVD or Blu-ray screeners, you know, that you send out. And there's all kinds of work that goes into that. And putting up, you know, new screenings. I don't know what all goes into that budget. It's probably more than just online ads. Like it's, you know, making sure the people who are voting are getting access to this and getting access to the story of making it, and who knows what. I don't know. I've read before just a little bit about what goes into short films, because short films do this too. But to me, it makes a little bit more sense for short films, because who is watching short films? Like almost nobody. And so once you see you've been nominated, like, okay, now we need to, like the case study I read was an example of animation studios. Like, oh, we made this animation, this 10-minute short film animation. Let's go and let's travel to get in front of whatever Walt Disney people. And because these are all our voters. And let's show them and have a screening for them and talk about it and the process. Right. That makes sense, because if you're not getting that stuff shoved in front of your face, you're probably just not going to be aware of it. Anyway, they spend a lot of money. But the cool thing for me watching that was watching Sean Baker just crush it. And my favorite award, and it was so funny, like within minutes, I think you and I sent each other the same clip of him talking about that process. And he had left he won an award for best editor, which was surprising if you didn't know that he was editing his own films, which I did not. I had no idea, but until he won that award, or that he was nominated, wins it, and I'm just like, so excited and thrilled because I prefer to edit my own work as well. And I've gotten some shit for that from some people who really don't even watch my work. They just like, oh, you shouldn't be editing. You should have someone else edit your stuff. And I was like, I don't trust other people to edit my stuff. Because to your point, before we press record, you're talking about the way you and I watch stuff. And you were just commenting like whenever you watch, you're tuning into the emotion of a performance. And that's most of editing for me. It's not about, was the shot in focus? Was the camera move perfect? Was the performance communicating something to the audience? An idea, an emotion? Was it connecting, on a deeper, visceral way that isn't being communicated by how clean the audio is? Like, I don't care. That stuff it matters, but it's tertiary, behind these other things. And so if you're not every editor brings that to the table. Like, I think different editors are good at different things. And the best editors are absolutely tuning into that emotional element. But some are like, they're really good at the technical and storytelling elements that go into editing. And that's amazing. You need those people. And so watching Sean Baker take the Best Editor award was amazing. And then hearing after the fact just elevated it to a whole other degree. Whenever I think, was it Soderbergh? No. Who?
He left a message for someone.
Yeah. And I'm trying to remember who that was because they were in the middle. They wrapped production at about the same time. And he was like, I bet they're already on to their fine cut. Like they've done.
Was it Dune? Sean Baker, voicemail to Lawrence Sher.
Oh, so
here.
Hey man, how are you? I'm actually, the editing isn't going well. Well, I can't edit right away, so I take a long time before even starting. So I'm literally just starting right now. And I think we wrapped at the same time, so you can see, probably you guys have a cut of Joker, and I haven't even begun my editing. So actually, I'm really behind, and I'm in a semi-bad place in terms of, like, I have 2 films to edit. Like Coco and everybody, they're all wringing their hands because of how far behind I am.
It says 1 year later. It's got him accepting awards at Cannes.
It's so... Oh, that's so good because I struggle with that same thing. I don't know exactly what he's struggling with. For me, I struggle with it's in the can and you feel on the day, great. You're shooting the scene. You got it. Good. That's amazing. I'm so happy. Okay, we can move on. And then you shoot your final scene like, sweet, got it. And you immediately get into your car to drive home. You're like, crap, I don't think I got anything. I don't think any of it's going to work. On the day, you can see it in your head and you're like, this scene is working now. That performance, that shot, that angle, now it's working. We can move on. I feel good. And my last short film, like, I think I was wearing out, some of my crew because I know in my head when a take is good. And I would do a series, like we would finish shooting a scene, an angle, and I know this is the angle I'm going to want for this line of dialogue. And I'll go through the whole scene and we'll get to that line of dialogue and it's not it. And I'll say, keep rolling. I announce to my crew first, don't you fucking stop rolling. So keep rolling, back, give me that line again from here. And then, she'll do it again. I was like, okay, reset and go again, reset and go again, reset again, one more time, again, whenever you're ready. And then I might be throwing direction along the way. Okay, quicker, maybe pause here. No emotion. Just say the words. Don't try to perform. Just fucking say the words. Got it. Cut, move on. Like, okay, we're good. And so you go through this whole process and then you walk away and there's this terror that creeps over you. And part of it is the exhaustion of like, I'm done with this thing. I don't want to see it anymore. And then part of it is just the terror of the work ahead of you that we all feel like, when it's time to take out the garbage and you're just like, I don't feel like getting off the couch and taking out the garbage. All that kind of stuff is absolutely there. But then I think making it harder is just the fear of seeing what you made and that it's not going to work out. The proof of the pudding, right, is in the eating. Is the whole, and now it's time to eat all this pudding you've been making. You wrote it, you got everyone out of their houses on set, you asked people to pay for it, and now it's time to make it. And so hearing him kind of go through that, and then his editing process is very similar. He goes further than I do, but it's similar to mine from what I've read, is that he doesn't do assembly cuts, this whole massive, gigantic, you hear all the time about, yeah, my first cut of the movie was 3.5 hours long and it's like a 90-minute movie. You're like, how? That's an assembly cut. You're just, everything is kind of in there. Every scene, every shot. Well, maybe not every shot, but the whole idea is in there. And he goes straight to a fine cut, which is how I like to work. I like to get as far into the edit as I can. And then maybe I'm still testing some ideas out. And he's just like, okay, here we are. And so for me, it's very satisfying and inspiring to see someone like that operating on that level. Same thing with Soderbergh. He's shooting his own films. Like almost all of his films, he's the cinematographer. And I feel like he created a pseudonym just to get people off his back. I don't know why. I still need to look into that, but it's really inspiring to be like, there's a lot you can do. And Soderbergh is often editing his own work as well. And so I take a lot of inspiration from that and encouragement of, there's another way to do it. There's the industrial way, and that's fine. That has a lot of pros to it. Someone's editing your work. You can be working on your next project, right? Nolan gets to start working on his next project while it's in editing. And he gets to sit with his editor when it's time for the Monday. It's Monday, here's notes. Cool. I'm going to go write The Odyssey now. And while Oppenheimer is being cut and scored and all that stuff, there's benefits to that, and I recognize that. But then is this your baby or is it not? Like, for me, I don't know, but it's really inspiring, to do what we do every week, and then also see the things that go behind it and other people's way of working, and build some camaraderie, I think, behind that.
Yeah, there's the idea of it's not like you're your own lawyer in a court, right? That's like, people act sometimes, or at least maybe people in the industry act, or you might feel like they're acting sometimes like it's that, like, how could you represent yourself? Like, no, we're not talking about you going to prison for life if it falls flat. If you don't do a good job of representing yourself. It is literally, like you said, you have an idea, you want to make sure that idea is translated in exactly the way that you want. But it's also, and I know that you don't like, I know that it's hard to start editing, but I also think that you enjoy it. I'm going to put that out there, because when you hit that moment where you're not editing, where you're crafting and you're assembling something, and you remember the moment of that take, and you're like, okay, I remember how I felt when she said it this way. This feels great. This is the moment I want. Oh, and it works perfectly when here. And that whole scenario of when you get into the flow state and stuff is coming together, I think that you love that. And why would you give that to someone else? Why would you've spent money and time and effort, and other people have too. Like, why would you give that feeling away? You wouldn't, like, yes, it's hard to get off the couch and go take out the trash, right? But once it's done and you don't have any trash in your house, you're able to make more trash, right? Like, it's the fun part of it, right? So yes, it's hard to get started, but once you get started, why would you allow that to be for someone else? Like, no, you want that. And I think that that's totally fine. I like making music. I also like mixing, but I don't like sitting down knowing I've got 90 tracks to look at and like kind of assembly. But once I get in the flow state and I'm sitting there and it's from 6 o'clock, now it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and I've spent 6 hours on this thing, it feels like zero time has passed. Yes, that's fun. It's enjoyable, after you get into that state. It's just a matter of getting into that state. So you love editing. Don't kid yourself. He loves editing too.
Yeah.
He does. It's just getting started, and I think you could sense that on that that voicemail too. You know.
Yeah. God, what a great, great night from the Oscars. Great inspiration from those guys, and hopefully it spells good things, not just in the film community as far as like indie films go, but maybe it's the kind of thing where the big studios are taking note and like, okay, let's not completely forget the way we used to operate, and we have, right? Everything I saw it described on Reddit the other day as it's now become a top-down process instead of a bottom-up process.
Yes.
Right? It used to be you and I and writers and filmmakers have an idea, and it's like, oh, I really want to make this, and we get together and we come up, like Spielberg says, hey, I really want to adapt War of the Worlds. How about you take a crack at that thing? Nice. I like this way it's shaping up really nice. Hey, give me studio executive, give me 10 minutes. Yeah, I really want to do War of the Worlds. Oh, you don't need 10 minutes. Greenlit, go do it. Right? That's the way it used to be. Like, we have an idea. I saw someone talking about Armageddon, and Michael Bay had an idea, and he got together with one of his writers and was like, hey, let's do this, and eventually pitched it in 20 minutes to a studio head, and he's like, oh, that's my July 4th movie. Go for it. Go make it. And that's that, right? And then J.J. Abrams walks off to the side and goes and writes Armageddon, by the way. J.J. Abrams wrote that.
Whoa, I did not know that.
Yeah, that's why I probably love it so much. And so now it sounds like it's executives saying, we want to go make this, go make that, and we're not going to do any of that other stuff, or very, very, very little of it. And so, yeah, hopefully that's the inspiration of like, let's remember who the creatives are and why audiences show up for their work. Because otherwise we're still taking out the trash, except it really is just recycled trash now.
Yeah, exactly. Man.
So it goes. Speaking of recycling trash, what are we covering today, man?
Oh my God, that was fantastic. Today we are covering the new Bong Joon Ho film, which is out in theaters when we're doing this episode, Mickey 17. So if you haven't seen the film, please pause the episode. We're going to spoil a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, we are. We're going to do a really deep dive into the story and writing. We'll talk about Mickey's metaphor. We'll talk about the creepers and all the other ideas, I think, happening in this film. There's a lot going on in Mickey 17. So we'll talk about it and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis, the quickest synopsis of the film that tells you literally nothing. Mickey 17 and expendable, I guess it tells you something. Mickey 17 and expendable goes on a dangerous journey to colonize an ice planet. It's written and directed by Bong Joon Ho, based on the novel by Edward Ashton, cinematography by Darius Khondji, featuring Robert Pattinson as Mickey Barnes, Stephen Yeun as Timo, Naomi Ackie as Nasha, Mark Ruffalo as Kenneth Marshall, Toni Collette as Ylfa, Anamaria Vartolomei as Katz.
Hi, Mickey. How you doing? Are you experiencing any vertigo, nausea, or dizziness?
I guess I am feeling a little dizzy.
It's only gonna get worse from here, Mickey, with a nice fever, too. Truth is, you're exposed to unthinkable levels of radiation right now, which is why we sent you out in the first place.
Okay.
If you could give us a full description of your symptoms. So, a couple things I want to go through on our cosmic radiation checklist. First, how long until your skin starts to burn? Then, how long until you go blind? And of course, how long until you die? That's the real nut we're after. Oh! Wow! Did you see that?
Oh, so, man, we're big Bong Joon Ho fans, and I don't know, this feels like he tried to get as many of his past films into one single film as he could. What did you think, man, Mickey 17?
I thought it was a lot of fun. Let's make this more of a conversation rather than just like what I think, because I was only able to see the film once, and I think that there's a lot of stuff going on, and I don't think that I have a full grasp on everything, to be completely honest. Because I love Pattinson. I think that he's fantastic in this film. Everything he's in, I just really I love it. The way that he plays Mickey 17, I think, is beautiful. And honestly, Mickey 18 is really beautiful. You know, like the character arc of Mickey 18 is one of my favorite aspects of the film, right? He ends up sacrificing himself. We already gave a spoiler. He ends up sacrificing himself, whereas in the beginning, you would not, when you first meet Mickey 18, you would never think that would happen, you know? So that having that character arc in there, I think, is a great writing tool, but also the way that Pattinson plays him, I think you kind of expect that might happen towards the end, right? Or you start seeing that could happen. And I only see that not because necessarily of the writing, but yes, because of that, but mostly because of his performance. I think his performance is really, really fantastic. I think that Naomi Ackie is fantastic in this as well. Like, oh my, she is another Toni Collette. Like having that, which Toni Collette does the face, you know, like the Hereditary face at one point in this film, which is perfect. It's like a great homage to that. But I think that Naomi Ackie also has a face like that, where she can emote, you know, at 1,000 miles an hour without saying anything, just through her face. And it's just really, really amazing. Like I can tell that she is in love with Mickey without her saying a word, you know, or that in that scene where she's yelling at Kenneth towards the end, she's like basically calling him an effing idiot and all that stuff. I think it didn't feel like a performance. And also the writing felt very grounded. You know, a lot of times when you have scenes like that, there's the things that the character says are so, you know, tied into what you would think would be a script. You know, you don't really notice it necessarily, but like it's you could, if you stepped back and analyzed it, you could say, okay, yeah, this feels like it would go well in this script, right? But the things she was saying when she was yelling at Kenneth at the end felt very much like what I would say, you know, having nothing to do with the script or the story. I would just say, you're an effing idiot, and you blah, blah, blah. It was very conversational. So I think it was really well written. I loved the animals. I loved the way that they, like the actual artistry behind them. You know, Bong Joon Ho always has some kind of nature and animal creature that is part of his stories. You know, because we share this planet, we share this universe with other creatures, and we need to make sure that we take that into account wherever we're settling or living or establishing our communities. Like, it's not just us, it's nature. And nature is not just on this planet. Nature is, well, we think, you know, probably other places too, like everywhere. So yeah, I think that was beautiful as well. It was a lot of fun to watch the progression of everything, but it was also really heart-wrenching. You know, that scene was funny to us, but it was also not at all. It was, you know, I was putting myself in his shoes thinking, like, how could someone rather do this and continually die all the time instead of dying once, you know? But they do a really good job of making sure that way of dying would be brutal. And yeah, so there's a lot that happens in this movie, but it was fun. It's a fun ride the whole way and enjoyable. It wasn't my favorite Bong Joon Ho film. I really like and expect subtitles. I knew there wasn't going to be any in this film. I knew that, and I was fine with that. But, you know, I don't know. I feel like reading the film along with it really helps in this scenario. And I think maybe it's like a cultural thing. I feel like I'm a little voyeuristic into the culture if they're speaking another language and I'm reading it, and you can kind of get away with a little bit more, because, it's a cultural thing. So if he says this or she says that, I wouldn't say this or that. Oh, but it's a cultural thing. So I kind of let go of, it's something that they would do in their culture. So I'd let go of it a little bit, on purpose, I just, and you don't really get that in this film. So maybe for example, the whole scene, the dinner scene for me was like, what the hell is happening right now? My God. Okay. That was a lot. And I think that scene in particular was, I just didn't follow it, yes, I know what happened and I understand it, but it just was kind of like, what's the purpose here? But I think that if it was a subtitled film, I probably would have gotten it, a little bit better, but that being said, it was a lot of fun diving into, and it was a lot of fun watching, and I really enjoyed it. So
yeah,
what did you think?
I enjoyed it, and I agree. Like, for me, my favorite is probably always going to be Memories of Murder, and then The Host, and then Parasite. This, for me, rides the line. I think you're right. Like, if this was like an all Korean cast and subtitled, like, I struggled really badly with the Kenneth Marshall and Ylfa characters. They're so cartoony and silly that I need some barrier between me and them being white and speaking English made it just feel too over the top. Whereas if there's that language barrier and some seemingly cultural barrier, then I can just kind of focus on the subtitles and not like read too much into it. But obviously they feel like these kind of Trump characters, Trumpian. And if it's hard to not see that, like, he's doing an impression. Like, he's almost doing, like, a lot of times he's doing a flat out impression of Trump. And that, I don't care. Like, I could give two shits about that guy. But it just makes it hard to engage the rest of the story on a more serious level whenever you have someone doing a Trump impression in the middle of the story. And so that kind of silliness is part and parcel to Bong Joon Ho films. Don't get me wrong. Like, you'll get that out of Snowpiercer and The Host for sure. But that's probably why I don't love Snowpiercer and why I do love The Host, right? It's like, there is that barrier there that makes it feel less cartoony for me. It's like, there's the personalities involved just feel more natural and endemic than whenever I'm watching Mark Ruffalo do a funny accent. That's just, so
I think that didn't help either.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think Ruffalo and Collette are incredible, but
Absolutely.
I think if we didn't know the character, like these actors, if I didn't know that was Mark Ruffalo, if it was somebody else that was unknown, it might help a little bit.
A little bit. And so, yeah, I was not excited to watch this twice, which I did because I walked out the first time and I was like, what was that? Like, I don't know what just happened. There's so much happening, and there feels like there's about, 5 or 6 different conversations being had all at once. And it's like the loudest dinner party conversation that is being had where no two people are talking next to each other. Every conversation is happening across the table and you can't track who's saying what, and you keep trying to jump in, and it's just so many words being said that at some point my brain fried out. And I stopped trying, and I was just like, I'm just going to enjoy the story. It's hard for me to not want to engage in the more philosophical aspects of this kind of writing where he's having a conversation. And I really short-circuited my shit here, man. I was just like, I can't shutting down now. It was just brutal because there's these elements of a clone. And they start having like these comments about if there's 2 printed out, is there a soul anymore? Because a soul goes to one body, and then there's these elements of worker rights, and then there's these anti-capitalist sentiment, that's happening, which is not the first time we've seen that from Bong Joon Ho. So it's not accidental. And then there's these elements of colonizing, right? We're colonizing a planet, and then you have these elements of the animals, right, and animal rights, kind of echoing Akja, and on and on. Like, it's not just those things. There's still more being said, and it just completely fried me until so going in a second time was very unnerving, because I'm like, now I know I'm in for something, and I don't know what to do about it. And so I wrote, I think on Alamo Draft House, you make your orders on these little 4x6 pieces of paper. And I filled up like 6 of those.
Oh my God.
So 3 front and back basically. And I was just like, my hand was cramping. I was just like, what's happening? And so I figured it out during, of all scenes, the dinner scene. Oh. And it was like the clouds opened and these crepuscular rays just struck me in the face, and and God chanted.
Please share.
Okay, so I'll start by talking about the opening, which gives us both elements that we need. Because on the one hand, you might think it's the classic cheat of have a fast start, right? Open halfway in, and now it's super interesting, really fast, and you've hooked your audience, right? And that's kind of the classic, like, oh, I'm falling to my death. How did I get here? Pause, rewind, right? That's very, and so we open with him falling through the ice, and he's sitting there dying, and his buddy looks at him and he's like, oh, you're dying. And he's like, what's it like to die? And all the elements that we've seen in the previews are just kind of being punched in the face right now. And then his buddy abandons him. He's like, oh, yeah, it's okay. We're good. We're cool. It doesn't make sense for you to risk it. And his buddy Timo is just a raging piece of poo. And then he leaves, and we see a creeper, and it's a massive one. It's creeping up, and he's like, okay, I guess I'll be alien food now, or whatever. And then we cut to, how did I get here? Right. And it's good for all those reasons. Yes, you get something immediately interesting happening. And then I love the framing too, because it gives us a reason to do a speed run through his past, right? And it gives us some voiceover context, even though he technically has no audience within the story, which is interesting whenever you get to the real point of this movie. And so the good part though about this movie is it's introducing the very 2 things that make sense of the metaphor of this movie, where we get the creepers and we get Mickey 17 being consumed. And that's a very interesting element of watching these 2 things come together in the opening. Because Mickey, let's just look at Mickey, his goggles, right? He's got these big goggles on his head and these kind of droopy ears. And it's interesting. It's a very animalistic quality that they're kind of giving him there. It's silly, right? For sure. Goofy, you might even say. But what I think is that it's giving him a mousy kind of quality, as in Mickey Mouse. He is a metaphor for mice, because this movie is actually about animal testing. This whole movie is just a big metaphor for how we treat animals. And that is going to start unlocking so much if you just watch the movie with that in mind, or think about some of these scenes, like the scene we just played a minute ago, right? What are they saying to him? Well, with that in mind now, let's listen to what they're actually saying in the dialogue. We're going to re-listen.
Hi, Mickey. How you doing? Are you experiencing any vertigo, nausea, or dizziness?
I guess I am feeling a little dizzy.
It's only gonna get worse from here, Mickey, with a nice fever, too. Truth is, you're exposed to unthinkable levels of radiation right now, which is why we sent you out in the first place.
Okay.
If you can you give us a full description of your symptoms. So a couple things I want to go through on our cosmic radiation checklist. First, how long until your skin starts to burn? Then, how long until you go blind? And of course, how long until you die? That's the real nut we're after.
That's the checklist, right? If you're doing animal testing or you're trying to study something in the lab, it's point by point. Like, here's what we're going to do. Here's why we're here. We want to know how long until you lose your sight, and where is it burning? How bad is it intense? And then how long before it actually kills you? Okay, cool. And for them, this is just data because he's subhuman. He's an expendable. And so let's walk through all of these kind of elements, right? Mickey gets used and replaced constantly, right? His pain is useful, right? He remembers early on in the opening, he talks about remembering being in class and doing a lab frog dissection. And he's feeling bad about it, of course. But the reason they're talking about labs and frogs and dissection, right? That's a classic thing we've all experienced for the most part going through science in high school or even junior high. And so the interesting thing, though, is as he's saying that, we're watching him be printed and killed and all that kind of stuff, is that they're using sad music to give you the tone to experience this while watching him die and print in a myriad of ways, right? Because this is sad. It's not comedy. We signed up for a comedy, and yet why do we feel kind of sad watching this guy get printed and killed, just cycled on end? Then we go into his backstory, of course. And this is interesting because the whole reason he goes on this trip, he takes out a loan to start a business, and the business didn't work out, right? That gets into his, I think, playing into the whole anti-capitalist sentiment that seems to permeate the film. And what was the business? He was told by his buddy, macarons are going to outsell hamburgers. The business didn't work out because people preferred meat. It's a very subtle thing that he's doing there. His whole business was to finally beat down hamburgers with another tastier food. And nope, people still like meat. And so the loan shark is a really interesting character, right? Darius blank. It could be anyone. This could be anybody.
Yeah.
He doesn't need the money. He just enjoys killing and the suffering, right? And then at the end of the film, what does he want? Darius blank sent one of his associates along because he wants Timo to make a video detailing a human dissection, going right back into that lab frog thing. And right, we even see the diagram, right? Here's your pieces.
Oh man,
things.
yeah, it's like mapped out, just like it would be in a biology class or something.
Yep. And so all that stuff is in there. And then we get to the dinner scene, right? He gets this dinner invitation, like, oh yeah, you're here to enjoy a really nice meal for once, because they've been starving this guy, right? And whenever he acts up, they throw him in a cage, right? And those cages they look exactly like animal cages. They're
too small and they're stacked on top of each other.
Yep.
Wow.
It's so like it just the more you watch with this framing in mind, the more it just screams, right? And so they go to this dinner. And again, this is the one that finally was like, oh, duh. It's so obvious. And I wrote it in like all caps in my notes. And so Ylfa makes this comment, which is really interesting because she sets a thesis statement, which is sauce is the true test of civilization. Only a barbarian eats charred meat. And so she's making a very strong statement about what sets civilization apart from barbarians and uncivilized people, right? Which is whether or not you eat charred meat, whether you eat something more elevated. And so they had Mickey over for dinner, not to treat him nicely, right? But to test the food. He's a food tester. And then whenever the food turns out to be bad, oh, this is an opportunity to now test our painkiller, right? It's torture to Mickey. For them, it's information. And that's animal testing in a nutshell. And then the response is really funny coming from Kenneth Marshall, because his comment to the scientist is like, oh, don't worry about it. We're going to fail upward to perfection. And that just layers in so many ideas right there, right? That's the constant slam about, the upper class or to white middle class men is like, you fail upwards. And I'm not going to dive into all of that, but I feel like it's just a comment on that idea, right? We fail upwards, which is not how failure is supposed to work, right? No. In a lot of ways, in some ways, maybe, whatever. Again, sidetrack. But throughout the film, we hear one line repeated several times. It starts in the opening with Timo, and he asks him, it's like, hey, Mickey, what's it feel like to die? And so he's wanting us to ask ourselves, what's it feel like to die? Because the answer is obvious. It sucks.
Awful.
It's terrible. But the big moment, whenever someone finally gets him to talk about it, is Kai. And they have this dramatic, beautiful, long shot. This movie is very tightly edited. It's cut, 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 cut. A lot of energy. And then we get to this moment. We're going to sit and watch and feel and empathize. And it starts in this wide 2 shot, and we just move closer, slowly, achingly slow, while they have this conversation. Because Kai finally asks him, like, I promised I'd never do this, but I got to know, what's it like dying? And he realizes, empathetic guy that he is, and that's the performance. Oh, Robert Pattinson, everything about his performance just oozes empathy. Because it's silly, and he comes across as a bit of a moron, but in reality, he's just very sensitive. He's just a very sensitive guy. He's like, you're asking because your friend Jennifer died? And she's like, we locked eyes right before. What did she feel? And that's when he goes into it, right? I always feel scared. It's terrible, dying. I hate it no matter how many times I go through it. It's scary every time. That's a beautiful, oh. And so what she responds with is really important, because she's making a comment. You don't look printed. You're just a person. Like, you're a human being. You're a being. And that layers into some of these other comments that we hear. Ylfa makes a really great one. And it's so subtle. But at the dinner table that they're having this big conversation about what they're trying to do right on that planet. Let's see if I can find it. He says, the church or company chose me to lead the mission to create a planet of superior race people, superior people, right? And so there's this whole idea that this planet, Niflheim, which is a crazy name. I'm sure there's something behind it, but I have no idea what.
Yeah.
But the idea is they've come there to create a better kind of person, to create a superior way of life, which is really important when you factor in creepers and all the other conversations happening in this movie. But what I really find interesting is this little slip that Ylfa makes, because coming from her, you think one thing, but it's really about another, because she makes a comment about, mankind, humankind, right? She corrects herself. She says mankind and corrects herself with humankind. On the face of it, because she's a woman, you think she's correcting herself for the point about not being exclusive to men. Like, this is about women too. But the bigger point that's being made is equating humankind to all kinds of life. It's not about man per se. It's about humankind and imbuing animals with sympathy and understanding of some dignity and humanity. And so she's making an equivalence about humankind. And that's really good to consider. And then you get to the end of the film, right? Right before Mickey 18 makes a sacrifice, and he's having a hard time, and Kenneth Marshall is terrified, and he looks and he has his own realization at last when he tells him point blank, "You're also afraid. We're both afraid." He's like, "Yeah, I'm afraid." And I can't make out what he says after that. I'm sure it's wildly important to the point of the film, but Mickey 18 says something after, "Yeah, I'm afraid," and says something else and then detonates. And it's heartbreaking and beautiful for someone to only realize when it's their own life that's about to be taken, to be able to recognize that fear in someone else. Because
it's so crazy because, I mean, I don't know. I've been thinking about this too, maybe getting older or whatever, but like, you never really think about what dying means in your life. I'm going to challenge everybody. You never really like imagine what that's like. And then I did feel these moments of like, and I think it's because they're calling out being afraid. There is not a single soul on this planet that does not have some kind of fear. Maybe you don't need to call it fear necessarily, but just like apprehension when it comes to the idea of dying, right? And they're actually like calling that out here. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you get to the end, the very end, and he goes through that whole dream state, in which I'll try to come back to at some point. But he finally has this realization. He feels bad for all the Mickeys that came before him and for Mickey 18. But he's also like, I'm realizing it's okay for me to be happy. Beautiful. And then we get that very end credit that goes from Mickey 17 to 18, Mickey Barnes. Right? He's not a number. He's a person. They're trying to give you the idea that this animal treated character is more than just a number in a lab to be experimented on, that Mickey is Mickey Barnes. And I love the use of the name there, Barn. I don't know what he was going for, but to me, it represents like a barn, maybe a representation of providing shelter and food and comfort to animals, instead of, treating them like a number and putting them in cages and etc. It's a really fascinating way, because you could have picked any name, and unless there's some other way you can use Barnes, I don't know where else that would come from, but that's the idea. And so you have all that represented in just Mickey himself, but it's reflected in the subplots. And a good way of writing a story, a screenplay, is you have your big theme, right? Mickey is our big theme. He's encapsulating everything we believe and are trying to get the message out about to our viewers. And then you want to reflect that in your subplots. So you have your A plot, and then you have your B plots, and everything else kind of going underneath the surface. And that's reflected really nicely with the creepers, right? They're kind of our subplot that begins to take on very significant elements of the main plot. Now, to be fair, I'm not entirely clear what the main plot would be if I were to encapsulate this thing, because it's so interwoven. But anyway, one way or another, regardless, the creepers are important, obviously. And that's why we open with them. We're getting to the two main aspects of our metaphor and collapsing them into one thing, right? And we discover when we come to that moment again, right, which is one of the longer opening title sequences ever, because it's like half an hour before you get to, that. And we find out creepers don't eat humans. In fact, on Niflheim, we don't see any food chain at all on their planet.
Oh, good point.
And so creepers, we've come to realize eventually, they healed Mickey. It's just really interesting in comparison to the technology that was there to harm and reprint him. Like, that's kind of the way he's being treated on this ship, this alien ship on this planet, is all about using technology to destroy and rebuild, and kind of this torture cycle that he's being put on. And so it feels like some kind of commentary about the maybe the healing and precious nature of nature itself. And so creepers and the other elements, creepers also have all these kind of human animal features interwoven into the design, right? They have this kind of finger-like faces that looks like just fingers for their face. And then they have like this rat tail, mouse tail. They're kind of possum-like, and also kind of cockroach-like, a little rat-like. It feels like an embodiment of all species, right? Mammal, rodent, whatever. It feels like they tried to include as many elements of the animal kingdom as humanly possible when creating this creature. And I wouldn't be surprised if in certain scenes they look very different from other scenes. But it seems like they collapsed it all into one creature to represent all of the animal kingdom. And so creepers also have this kind of animal defense, right? And animals always have these kind of false threat defense of puffing themselves up or creating ways to make themselves scary to predators. And that's kind of their big defense, right? Was making Mickey believe that they're going to kill all humans through their telepathic or sound barrier noise. And at the end, he realizes, oh, that was a ploy. Good one. It's great. And so anyway, those are the big ideas. I'll rush through my straggling notes I didn't get to organize and see if anything else pops up. But it's also just kind of interesting that Mickey was recycled, right? Everything that's printed in him is made of scraps and garbage. And that's kind of interesting that he's this kind of base worker and he's kind of given nothing, the worst of everything. In that same way, his memories are stored in a brick. That feels like another class commentary, of the lower class and the brick builders and the people who build your society. He tortures himself is another interesting aspect. He thinks he is the reason this is happening to him, right? It's karma. For punishment for pushing the red button when he was a kid, causing his mom to crash and die. And at the end, he finally realizes it didn't do any of those things. Watching that the first time, you're like, what could that have? What? Who builds a car like that?
I know, but when you're a kid and you're that version. The other thing that was interesting is that there were different. I guess that Mickey 18 is a different version of him, but it's all versions that are inside of him. Right. It's just like maybe one version is a little bit more aggressive, like Mickey 18. And I think it is also wonderful that Mickey 18 is the one who tells him at the end or towards the end, dude, that button, that had nothing to do with it. And maybe that's why, because Mickey 18 doesn't believe that the button was the reason his mom died. Maybe that's why he is more, he is the way that he is, because he's not so like taking the world on his shoulders kind of thing, or but Mickey 17 thinks that he killed his mom. I don't know, but I think it's beautiful that Mickey 18 is the one that tells him, man, that had nothing to do with it.
Absolutely. And to double down on your point, I mean, that's probably the reason why on the arm of Kenneth Marshall, Mickey 18 is white button and Mickey 17 is the red button.
Yeah.
Right. He's like, I'm going to prove to him that he didn't by not pressing the red button.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh man. That's
there
great.
Seems to be a lot kind of layered into the red button idea that I don't think we're able to capture entirely, but worth thinking about. It's also fun. Kenneth Marshall advises no sex on the ship. It's a waste of energy. And it's like nothing on this ship is enjoyable. You're not allowed to have any joy or personal fulfillment. And then I love Nasha at the end. She's trying to use that against him because now here he is on this planet trying to make a war, and she's like making a case against war. It seems like an anti-war message laced in here as well, right? It's a waste of energy, and those creatures don't seem interested in war. Like, this is you going against your own philosophy of waste of resources, one, and then two, you're just fabricating, you're inventing a reason to feel good about yourself, to go to war and make yourself into some big war hero. And so I love, that kind of messaging for sure. Ylfa seems obsessed with sauce, and I don't really know the deal with that.
Well, okay. So I wanted to ask you something about this. So the way that I got this, and I didn't know what you were going to take from it was, so sauce could be a metaphor for anything that we're obsessed with, right? And it's literally the most broken down kind of result that you can get from something, right? You take this thing like an animal. Let's just because we're on this metaphor of animal testing. Take this thing like a living, breathing thing, and you pummel it down and down and down and down. It's not a piece of meat. It's not even, like a sprinkle of anything. It is a goo, and it's the base, which is literal what a sauce is. It's a base thing, and we are obsessed with this like base, of like breaking everything down to this like little thing. And she is everything, her whole life is based around this. Like, it's just, and maybe she's like the embodiment of what, this animal testing result is, of just breaking everything down to that. And she's absolutely obsessed with that. There's definitely something in there. I don't know if that's it, but maybe it's an aspect of that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think maybe it's working on a couple of different levels. One is that aspect of breaking things down and instead enjoy whole foods, right? Like what nature provides is not that. It's plants and whole, unprocessed things. And so I think there is something there. And I wonder if it also serves as a metaphor for the movie itself, that is blending all these ideas together into one thing. Because you get to the end of the movie, whenever he's having this dream while he's getting ready to press the button, not now, but whenever he gets ready to press the button, not yet. I love that he keeps trying to press the button before it's time. He's like, oh, okay. And so, but he starts having that dream during that moment, and he imagines Ylfa, and she asks him, how's the sauce? And it's on the floor. And he goes and gets a swab of it on his finger, and he's about to eat it, and he asks her, what's it made of? She says, rude, a sauce that could, don't tell me you've gotten suddenly too good to eat sauce off the floor. Floor sauce. I think she just calls it floor sauce. And she makes this comment, though. It's a sauce, I think, that could appeal to even a cretin like you. And so I wonder if the idea is he's trying to make a movie that could appeal to everyone. Like, it's silly, it's campy, and it's got all these ideas, and hopefully you like it, and hopefully it gets into you and you get something out of it. I don't know. I think it's kind of layered in there somewhere. But
there's something also about her cutting the tail off the baby and then blending it up. Like, that's brutal. Like, I felt so, we know that these creatures are harmless at this point, and for her to do that is just, I had a visceral reaction. I did. She's just blending it up. I'm like, oh my God, this is awful. And I think that's a little bit of calling out of, like, if you saw how a hamburger was made, you might not want to eat a hamburger, let's be honest. And like where it comes from and these farms and all this stuff. I think you're right. It's all calling, to animal testing and the way that we treat animals in general. And I should have known that just because I love Bong Joon Ho films, and they all have some, element of nature and the way that we treat nature and animals and stuff. Should have known that, but I didn't. I did want to ask you though, too, if you caught all of the Nazi references.
The church German symbol looks like a straight up
swastika. A swastika.
Yeah.
And the bald guy who's with the thing, who's is straight up skinhead kind of like vibe, and then the uniforms they wear with the gun on his leg, not on his hip towards the end where he's wearing that uniform. That's straight up, German Nazi style uniform. And then his whole goal to have a speech to the animal, right? Like writing out, like almost like Napoleon, like a dictator.
Yeah.
Like what a dictator wants to be on the podium speaking, to the most important people in the room and everything. And but also I love that that's an aspect of it, but also that he's totally beholden to his wife and what she thinks of him. And he's very small. He's actually a very small, character, because he depends on her approval, not on his own belief of what he thinks is right, but on hers. And so she's really like the leader of all of this, anyway, I just thought that I definitely saw a lot of Nazi influence there.
Absolutely. They also have like Oxy running through the whole film.
Like, God, there's so much.
It's packed. The other interesting thing to me was the naming convention. They have a lot of like K's, L's and M's, and like Ylfa, her name is literally an L. Mickey, Kenneth Marshall, Kenneth, Jennifer and Kai. And they even make this comment about Jennifer and Kai being close. And J, K are right next to each other in the alphabet. And so they're kind of hanging out in this area of the alphabet, right? And of J, K, L, M, N, and Nasha, right? And it's just all here, right there in the center. And I don't know if that was just a fun way to organize everything, or if there's some other thing they're trying to get through to us. But it's interesting, again, another layer to think about. And yeah, to your point though about the religion. So you get to that dinner, there's also an element, I think, of like Judeo-Christian vibes that I get from the setting, right? There's all these candles on the table, and it's like, I wonder if they're trying to, I don't know, invoke some of these religious elements, not necessarily a judgment against Judeo-Christian, stuff, but just as a way to make you feel that religion is in the room with us right now, so to speak. So I don't know. Okay. The other thing that I had to check something, the gunshot, he takes a shot. Mickey takes a shot at the president. Mickey 18, is it? Right. He tries to shoot the president, or Kenneth Marshall, and it grazes his cheek, hits the black rock, and it chips it, right? And my God, if that isn't like prophetic, because it has elements of the Trump assassination, last summer.
Oh my God, yes.
But, and this is what I had to check, is when did they shoot this movie?
Right.
Because that would be a crazy thing to be able to fit in between now and last summer. And they wrapped filming actually in January of 2023, like a full year and a half before that event happened. So that is just complete coincidence from what I can tell. But that's just wild, because it hit the teleprompter and chipped. Yeah. Anyway, kind of crazy. The other things, I like that they deleted the memory brick. It just raises the stakes for the end sequence, of course. You got to make sure it feels like there's no going back now. The arcadey nerve gas was interesting. That might play more into the Nazi elements that you're talking about, because they're going to kill all the creepers with this nerve gas. And so, right? That's very Nazi stuff, but the other interesting thing about that is arcadey is also, there's a lot of things you could derive from arcadey. One, it could be a reference to like Utopia, Arcadia, but it could also be a reference to food, right? Arcadey is a dough improver. It provides nitrogen and mineral nutrition for yeast and that kind of thing. So it could be another element of food and the way we combine food and animals, and I don't know, seems to play in the same. It might just be a why not kind of thing. Like, okay, if we're going to name it something, let's just keep the metaphors thick. The whole anti-capitalist element. Mickey 17 and 18 have a productivity contest, right? They have to collect 100 creeper tails. The loser dies. And so that seems to play again on class, warfare, those kind of ideas. And then you get to the end, of course, Niflheim is now run by committee instead of, top-down dictatorship, elections. And of course, there's no more printing on Niflheim. And they destroy the printer, right? We're seeing it printing a new Marshall. There's all these elements of a soul. And this gets into cloning and the very complicated conversation that goes with clone technology. Because now, if you have cloning, you can print as many Kenneth Marshalls as you want. There's no end in sight. And so does the printer represent some kind of anti-capitalist sentiment, in the sense of until you overcome this thing, you're always going to have a Kenneth Marshall coming down the pike. Well,
they had that interesting story about the guy, the murderer.
He's a psychopath, right?
Yeah.
Serial killer.
Yeah.
And that's the inventor. And that's maybe another element, again, of class warfare and capitalism. It's so packed. So I don't know if it's just the little, toppings for the rest of the movie. I don't know. But yeah, it's interesting that Mickey presses the red button at the end to kill the printer. And so I don't know if this is calling back to this whole idea of like communism overcoming capitalism or what. But please, by all means.
The red button from the car.
It's the red button from the car that he finally uses in a productive way that sets him free. This thing that was holding him imprisoned is setting him free.
Yeah.
I don't know. The Red Scare. I mean, whenever you think red and these bigger conversations, you generally think of the Red Scare.
True.
The Red Scare being a representation of communism. I don't know. It's interesting. There's so much in here that I don't necessarily agree with, but I want to respect the filmmaker's voice, and that's all I'm trying to do here. Is not necessarily agree with it, but present it as he was trying to have me chew on it. And believe it or not, I'm a complete person capable of holding multiple thoughts.
What did you think of the visuals?
Oh man, I love Darius Khondji. I watched years ago. I watched this video essay on Khondji. He's the same guy who shot My Blueberry Nights.
Oh man. Okay.
Right. And so
I love that movie so much.
So good. It's so beautiful. Right. And he's amazing. He's completely underappreciated, I think. The way I heard him described was a chameleon. Like, he doesn't have a style. He can do any style. And maybe that's why people don't appreciate him. It's because Deakins has a style. Like, whenever you're watching a Deakins film, you're like, oh, I see Deakins fully represented in this. Whereas Khondji is just like, what's the story need? I'm going to make that. Or even more, what's my director need? I'm going to give him that. And so he's just so incredibly talented, and he's been doing it since the 90s. And so, I think the visuals are gorgeous and fitting. And like the visual effects, unbelievable. The way they were doing Mickey 17 and 18. Like, you really stopped thinking that this is tech that we're watching and that these are just two guys on screen at the same time.
100%.
Unbelievable, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, was it like facial replacement or like, because they were fighting at times. I could tell. They did a really good job. Bong Joon Ho, or I guess whomever made these decisions, did a really good job of staging stuff. There was one scene when Mickey 17 walks into the room at first to see after Mickey 18 and Nasha have hooked up or whatever, and she sees them both and she puts them both next to each other and they take their shirts off, right? There's in that shot, we're behind Mickey 17, so you can't see his face at all, but you see the profile face of Mickey 18. I think it's like a really beautiful way to kind of make it a little bit easier on the special effects to make, but that's all one shot. Like, we see 17 walk in and he turns around, and so now we're seeing his back. We're not cutting. We didn't cut. And so we've seen Mickey 18's face the whole time, or basically when he walks into frame, and we still see his profile face, but then we don't see Mickey 17 anymore. So we don't have to worry. We know that that's Mickey 17. We know that's Robert Pattinson, but it doesn't have to be practically, right? Now that's the stunt double if we wanted it to be. And
she gets him on the bed and she interacts with both of them. Like, she kisses one, she runs her hair through the other, and it's just like, what? And then there's that shot of them all lying down, and Mickey 18 reaches over and starts putting his fingers in Mickey 17's hair. Like,
I was like, what is happening right now? What am I about to watch? I don't know.
So I was blown away. I really hope Pattinson gets some recognition for this. This isn't the kind of film that does well at the Oscars, I think, but maybe because it's Bong Joon Ho, maybe it will. Yeah, but the visual effects, unbelievable. Yeah. Great execution. Yeah, melted my brain. Absolutely. Final thoughts, man?
No, I think, man, your insights were fantastic. I 100% think now that it is definitely metaphor for, animal testing and in general, like Mickey is. I love that his name is Mickey. You're right. Of course. You are excellent at this naming convention thing. You always find something. I love it. It's great. I had a good time, a good excuse to go to the theater, see great acting and a great filmmaker. I love that this film exists. It's not my favorite Bong Joon Ho, but just keep making movies, man. Like, I will always buy a ticket. Always. There's always something to pick apart in there. I think I'm glad you took so many notes, because, man, that's super informative.
So crazy. Yeah. Same, man. Like, I'm down. Even if it's not going to be a movie that I rewatch, I know I'm going to have a really interesting, fun time going through it. And at worst, I'll have something to think about afterwards. Like, if you walked out of Parasite and you didn't have thoughts, you're like flatlining, man. I don't know what to say. Like, he's giving you something to chew on. The Host, it's a fun ride, right? But you walk away and you're like, yeah, there's a lot in there to unpack, thematically and philosophically. Yeah. Just every time he steps to the plate, he's got something to say. And I appreciate him finding a way to have something heavy, but not making it heavy-handed. It's a difficult thing to do. Not everyone does that, And so I really appreciate him threading the needle that way. It's a great ride no matter what. So nice. What are you going to recommend this week, man?
So we were talking before we got on the podcast about writing and about the idea of writing something, just like sitting down and writing, not trying to write anything good. In fact, trying to write something bad. Right. And so I think that goes really well with what I'm going to recommend, because it's so weird and crazy. It's not a film. It's not a movie. It's a TV show. It's an older TV show. Not older, but just like whatever. I'm going to recommend Adventure Time. For anybody who has not seen it, you like it? Okay. We had never talked about Adventure Time.
Homies help homies.
Homies help homies. My kids. So my friend, a good friend of mine, swore by it, and he's like, "You got to watch this." And then my kids started found it, and were like, "Oh my gosh, let's watch this." So I started watching with them. And it is so weird and so off-putting, because you have no idea what's happened. It's so like somebody sat down and vomited on a page, and that's what this show is. It's literal brain vomit, and yet you end up destroyed at the end of the show. It is so gut-wrenchingly beautiful in all the best ways, and it's. I don't know how many seasons, like 7 seasons. It's long. There's a lot of episodes, but it's so beautiful and so just very like I said, somebody just sat down and vomited on a page, and that's what it is. And yet it is beautiful. There is no filter on it at all. It's like if you took Rick and Morty and took out all the meaning, all the subtext, and just made it brain vomit, and then added love and care and friendship at the end of it, and there you go. So, Adventure Time.
Well done. It's funny because I thought of Adventure Time while watching this movie, because Timo, it reminded me of Bimo.
Bimo, yeah,
my favorite character. Like, I love Bimo.
Yeah,
yeah. So great recommendation. I am going to recommend a film that came out called Parthenope. It's a beautiful film. It's got a lot of interesting ideas. It's gorgeous. Just a great looking movie. The performances are fantastic. It's got something to say, and you'll have a pretty good time while it's saying it. And I don't know, if you can get me in Italy during the summer, I'm probably going to just enjoy it anyway, no matter what. But I think it's a lovely film, and it's I don't think it's a hate film, but there's, in terms of a love-hate film, but I think you'll either really love it or you'll just kind of like it. I don't think there's going to be a lot of people who just straight up hate it, but you'll probably enjoy it. I don't think it's short. It's got some runtime on it, maybe 2.5 or something, but I just had a great time watching it. So Parthenope, check it out.
Cool.
If you're enjoying... stay tuned for next week. We're going to take a look at the new Soderbergh film. I realized we hadn't really done any Soderbergh films up until Oceans. So I'm like, he had Presence come out, a month or two ago, and now he's got Black Bag coming out. So let's take a look at Black Bag and see what else he's got going on. It's got Michael Fassbender, Cate Blanchett, and probably a bunch of other people. He's got, I can't remember her name off the top of my head. She's in HBO's Industry, and she's fantastic. So I'm excited to see her get an opportunity as well. And so, check out Black Bag. We'll be covering that next week. And if you're enjoying the show, don't forget, subscribe, drop us a review. If there's something you want us to cover or talk about, things you find interesting, let us know. And if you want to comment on this episode, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/Mickey17.
And our quote of the day is from Steve Irwin. I love this. We don't own the planet Earth. We belong to it, and we must share it with our wildlife. Man, the world is a worse place having lost that guy.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, great quote.
It goes back to what you said earlier, right? Like you said almost this exactly, right? We share the earth with other things. And no matter what your outlook is in terms of your religious views, even especially if you're Judeo-Christian, like it literally says we're here to be stewards. Part of being a steward is taking really good care of what's in your care. And so, there's no reason we can't be kind and good to the planet while also being kind and good to ourselves. And hopefully, as messages like this keep coming out, we'll consider that and find a better way forward, because we only get this once. And no matter what technology comes along, once you take out the rainforest, that's gone. You can maybe reprint those trees and you can reprint those things, but it only happened once and you can't recreate it as it exists today. And so hopefully we'll do better and look at treating our planet better. There's definitely some reason for apprehension in how we're treating the Earth right now, and I'm rooting for us to get our shit together, because it's one and done. Like, this is our only planet. As good as Mars looks from here, we don't want to actually live there. No, ridiculous. One of one. Oh man. Well, dude, great insight. I had a great time talking about this. Thanks, man. Really, I think you saved the movie for me in a lot of ways. And hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. If there's a film you'd like to see us pick apart, let us know. Who knows? Maybe we'll cover it. And subscribe, review us wherever you get your podcasts. It all helps a lot. Share us with your friends. We really appreciate it. Until next time, I'm Todd. I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies.